What's up, everybody? Welcome again to the Chasing Creativity podcast. This is episode 22 with electronic music producer Rylan Taggart. How's it going, everyone? Episode 22. Man, I feel like this is just a great way to kick off the start of 2019. And to speak to that, I hope you're having an awesome start to 2019. So this is releasing like the 9th, the 10th. We're starting to get into the swing of things for the new year. And I hope you have awesome New Year's resolutions. And I hope they are going well. Just to speak to that a little bit more, I think that this episode is really fitting to kick things off for 2019. Rylan Taggart, he's released on such labels as Elliptical Sun and recently Lane 8's record label, This Never Happened. So we're going to speak more to that. But before we do, speaking to the music that you had just heard, that is from an electronic music producer known as MLT FTR. He is a friend of the podcast, and that song is called Space, also known as Breaker. And a couple things to mention to start. First, go check out his SoundCloud. So it's soundcloud.com/MLTFTR if you'd like to learn more. Or you can find him on Instagram at MLTFTRmusic. Now, as I mentioned, he's a friend of the podcast. If you would like to also have your music shown out at the beginning of a given episode, just simply email me or write me on Instagram. I would be happy to talk with you and share out some music. So I know I've mentioned it, but email is chasingcreativity.podcast@gmail.com and Instagram is chasing.creativity.podcast. So really, feel free to reach out. I love talking with all you guys and girls. So moving into the episode, as I mentioned, Rylan Taggart, this is such an interesting conversation because he has been producing for, I think as we get into it, about 4 years, something around those lines. And he's been producing on labels such as Elliptical Sun, as I'd mentioned, and This Never Happened. And he's been supported by Above and Beyond, doing guest mixes on their radio show, all within this short amount of time. I mean, I think it's really incredible. He's a really talented producer. And so I think it's an awesome conversation just to hear about that process he's gone through, how he addresses the given tracks, what he looks for in terms of inspiration or how he gets in the mood to write music, all these kind of interesting things. So it's a great conversation. It's really, really interesting. And I just, of course, really thank him for coming on and sharing his experiences and taking the time to come on and have these conversations. So one thing to mention before we jump into the episode, if you would like to go learn more about his music, he can be found on SoundCloud, Spotify. On SoundCloud, it's Rylan Taggart Music. That's RYLAN TAGGART Music. He can be found on Spotify. Go check him out on Beatport. Support his music, buy the tracks. I mean, that's how that's the best way, in my opinion, to go support and then, of course, see all these artists live. Aside from that, as I mentioned, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Instagram. If you'd like to follow him on Instagram, he can be found at Rylan Taggart Music. So if you'd like to go check that out. I do know also he's starting to do a YouTube series where he goes into the DAW and talks about production for melodic deep house and progressive house. And as he mentioned on the episode, that's something on the YouTube episode, that's something that is a bit tough to find. Good tutorials for music production, for deep melodic house, for progressive house. So I think it's just started. I think he's at episode 1, if I'm not mistaken. So it's fairly new, but episode 1 was awesome. So I already got tips from it. So I highly recommend going and checking that out. I would just search him on YouTube or check him out on Instagram. I'm sure that's a great way to get in touch with his YouTube. So that's it. We're going to jump right into the episode. Want to keep it short and sweet. A couple last things. I mention this on every episode, but really, if you're enjoying these episodes, subscribing and rating and commenting on whatever platform you listen to these episodes on is so useful. For instance, iTunes. If you listen on iTunes via the podcast app on iTunes, that helps bump this podcast up. I want to see more eyes on the podcast in 2019, 2020, moving into, let's maybe top 100 for a music podcast. I mean, that would be awesome. So it's all, this whole thing is thanks to you guys and thanks to guests coming on, honestly. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And all that stuff means the world to me. So moving right in, let's jump into the episode. As we jump in, I'll be playing or we'll be sharing a track from Rylan titled Signal. It is the newly released track, one of 3 on the new Root to Branch Volume 3. That's Lane 8's record label. So this is a very new track and it's beautiful. So look forward to that. We'll share out that song and then jump right in today's episode. So I hope you enjoy it and I will speak with you all again soon. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing pretty good, man. It's always funny to start these things off, but I think a good way to do it is just, thanks for being on, man. I'm super excited to dig into this stuff today.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I was kind of looking at maybe a good place to start. It's funny. Last episode or 2 episodes back, I was speaking with Deza, and after the episode, we're just chatting, and he mentioned, maybe reach out to Rylan and a couple other people. And at the same point, I had listened to Signal that just released on Roots to Branch Volume 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just a weird coincidence that your name kind of popped up, and man, it's worked out perfectly. I really appreciate you being here, but first, thank you. And also, I just want to say that those 3 tracks on this most recent release with Root to Branch is just, it's fucking amazing. They're great songs.
Thank you. Yeah. I luckily enough, Lane 8 is like very supportive of all my music and stuff, so it was exciting to release on his label.
Yeah. So, and I kind of wanted to just dig into all that today, especially, we had been talking about this before we started recording, but you mentioned like 4 years ago, I saw on Instagram, you saw Above and Beyond live, and that inspired you to start producing music. And this is 4 years ago. So now fast forward 4 years, you're doing a guest mix on Group Therapy Above and Beyond radio show. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even really believe it. That was a couple weeks ago now.
Yeah.
and it's even crazy for me to think that that all happened. So
Yeah. And so above and beyond, they're probably, from what I saw, I mean, they're a big influence for your music and starting out then. How has that kind of transitioned, or how has that influenced you through these last 4 years? I mean, would you say they're like one of your biggest influences for the music you make?
um I think so in a way. They're, for example, like, I think a good place to like start this off would be like how I found out about them. For
Yeah.
example, is yeah, randomly at work one day, like I used to work in a warehouse, and people had just put on their phones with pretty much whatever music they wanted to play that day. And my buddy Chris, and I'm sure he's gonna listen to this, so hey, who actually happens to live like 5 houses down the block from me. But we used to work together, and he threw on an episode of group therapy one day, and that was kind of like when I was into electronic music for a bit, but I was more into like Skrillex and Excision and like dubstep and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of came from the world of like classic rock and like metal and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So when I heard like trance, I always really liked um like influences from like classical music and like cool sounding chords and like ambience and stuff. So when I like listened to like yeah, like when I heard the radio show for the first time, they're playing a lot of, like trancey kind of stuff and
Mm.
melodic house, blah blah blah. And yeah, I think I just asked him what it was, and he told me he was listening to it because they were coming to Vancouver for the first time.
Mm.
And yeah, this was a bit of a funny story. What was it? I believe the lineup for the show was like Hardwell and Above and Beyond. And this was like 2013, maybe? Maybe earlier, in 2012, maybe? I can't remember exactly, but um, so it was Hardwell and Above and Beyond were playing here, and he didn't know who Above and Beyond were, and they were headlining. And I think a lot of the younger people were kind of into like Hardwell and weren't quite too familiar with Above and Beyond. So he started like listening to them and kind of like really started to like them himself before he even saw them.
Mm.
And that's kind of why he found out about them. And I heard that and started like listening to the radio show myself. So I actually didn't go to that show in Vancouver.
Uh-huh.
So that's why that wasn't the first time I saw them, but
Interesting. So that was kind of a point in your life where this opened up a whole new genre for music. Like as you mentioned, you were more interested in like Skrillex, Excision, and this was new.
yeah, that was kind of my music taste when I was like 20,
Mm.
was more dubstep and like big room and commercial stuff. But
Uh.
ultimately, who got me into electronic music is definitely Dead Mouse, like
Oh yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
that was the absolute first electronic show I went to. We had the Winter Olympics here in 2010,
Mhm.
and I guess the Canadian government was kind of like putting on a whole bunch of like outdoor music concerts and stuff at the time, featuring a lot of Canadian artists, and Dead Mouse
Mm.
being from Toronto was one of them. And he played in this big park they had like all set up for the Olympics with like big huge screens and like food trucks, and it was kind of like a fan area for the Olympics, but it was like
Yeah.
it's in a pretty big park, so it's this big area. And the park happens to be across the street from right where my grandma lives.
Mm.
So I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I'll go there and I can just like stay there overnight. And yeah, so because of the Winter Olympics, I kind of got into electronic music. Like, I think, yeah, I think like I kind of listened to it occasionally on like YouTube or something, or if people sent me songs, but like I wasn't completely into it.
Yeah.
I think it was like one of my friends had like a cousin who lived in Germany and would always send them music to listen to, and Germany kind of, I guess Europe in general was like more into like electronic music for a longer time before it
Right.
became a thing in North America. So yeah, their cousin in Germany would send them stuff and like we'd
Mm.
listen to it. But apart from that, I wasn't super into it. And then I saw Dead Mouse in 2010 for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like when I got my first glimpse at electronic music.
So it was more that live experience that kind of pushed you over the edge rather than hearing some of those Dead Mouse songs early on. Like that was just like kind of
A
an
bit
aha
of
moment.
a bit of both.
Mm.
I think back in like 2010, 2009 kind of I always thought electronic music was just, like when you heard like something like Sandstorm or like Bass
Oh.
Hunter or like really
Right.
fast and like happy
Totally.
sounding. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of that. I thought it was just kind of whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Sandstorm's a legendary song, but what
No.
that's not really like what caught my interest.
Right.
And then I heard like some of Dead Mouse's tracks, like I Remember, which is probably
Oh, yeah.
my favorite song ever still. And I'm kind of doing like a little bootleg of that, which I might not release or not. We'll see.
Uh-huh.
And then Faxing Berlin, Strobe, pretty much anything on Random Album Title, for example.
Right.
Or yeah, like
Yeah.
he kind of had stuff which sounded like more sad and it was like kind of had depth to it. And I like never heard electronic music which was like, it wasn't like I never heard anything before which was kind of like darker sounding and until stuff like that came along and I like thought it was like really cool because I think I liked like metal and classic rock for that. Like there's a lot of like emotion and feeling in the music, and then I never really thought that of like dubstep doesn't really have like
Right.
emotion
It's
and it's like it's kind of like party music, right?
Exactly.
So when I heard some of Dead Mouse's stuff for the first time, that's when I first really got interested, and then I saw him and kind of went from there.
Now, were you playing music before this at all? Did you have any experience like
Yeah.
playing piano? Okay.
I always wanted to play guitar growing up, and my mom wouldn't
Uh-huh.
let me unless I took piano. So my mom forced me to take piano lessons for like 6 or 7 years, basically like all throughout elementary school and high school and stuff. So I honestly can't really play anything anymore. I really can't. I kind of know very basic music theory from what I remember, but I mean, I was like 11, so.
Right.
And then I eventually did start playing guitar and like played a lot of stuff like Pink Floyd, Zeppelin, Aerosmith, just kind of fooled around at home, and then got a bit more into like metal, like Avenged Sevenfold was like my favorite band in high school, In Flames.
Oh, I loved In Flames. Yeah.
Kind of stuff like that. So I don't know. That's kind of like what I listened to throughout high school, and then towards the end of high school, like 2009, 2010 is when electronic music kind of I got introduced to.
Yeah. Now, when this all kind of started, so you had this kind of foundation of piano, picked up a bit of guitar,
Yeah.
and you had this kind of, I guess, moment where you realized this is something that you wanted to pick up. To
Right.
go from there to 4 years, fast forward 4 years now, Above and Beyond's playing your music, you're releasing on Lane 8's record label. It's incredible. So what was that day to day like? Because I always try and get a good sense of what that time commitment's like, because for me personally, I feel like that's such a crazy accomplishment to have gotten that far in 4 years. So, and I know you work. So, is there just a lot of time outside work where you're just putting in hours working on producing? What's that like?
Yeah, for sure. So go back to like the Above and Beyond thing. So basically, like all my friends were kind of hyping up Above and Beyond after they saw him them that first time. And there's this festival in Washington at the Gorge Amphitheater. I mean, you're in California?
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay,
we're
so
close because
yeah.
I'm only an hour ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's this festival in Washington State, and it's at the Gorge Amphitheater. I don't know if you've
You've
probably heard
I've never
of it.
been, but I've heard of it.
It's one of the like probably the more famous venues in the States, and there's a festival there called Paradiso, and it's like the first week of July, I believe. And anyways, a couple friends wanted to go, and I agreed to go with them. We all kind of like made the road trip down. It's like a
Mhm.
4 hour drive from like where I am, like just Vancouver area here.
Mm.
And went down, and I really wanted to see Above and Beyond because of all my friends hyping them up, and I like listened to their radio show a bit back then, and I believe this was June or July 2017. Right, no, 2015, sorry. Yeah.
Mm.
So that was around then, and then I saw them, and I was like kind of like blown away by like them, and after I like went to like a big festival like that, I like kind of got like the urge to start producing music myself.
So, and that's incredible because, as you mentioned, if that's as like 2015, and we were speaking about this earlier before we started the episode, but you have Sahara releasing on Elliptical Sun in just 2016. That's
Right.
so that's crazy because I know a lot of guys who are producing and have put in the time, and they're a year in, couple years in, and to accomplish that in that amount of time, I just think is incredible.
Yeah, it's well, thank you, but yeah,
It,
it's kind of hard to believe. Like I always doubt myself a lot, and then you kind of have
Mm.
to like go back and realize like what you've kind of done, I guess.
Totally. Oh, absolutely. That's funny you say that. That's how my girlfriend is. She'll do things if she's in grad school. She'll do incredible things,
Yeah.
and I'll try and verbalize it, and she doesn't quite agree. She won't.
Oh, trust me. I'm like like the world's biggest critic. Like someone will like message me and like, "Oh, congratulations," and I'll just be like, "Why?"
Yeah, 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 yeah. So then you're sitting in this space where okay, so you've had these releases, and you're
Right.
still being a pretty heavy critic on the music that you're making, on the accomplishments so far.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Although like, oh no, I just like listen to certain songs by certain artists, and I'm just like,
Mhm.
sometimes I'm just like, how did they do that? Or like, I need to make something like this. Like,
Yeah.
I get very if I find something I like I really like it, and like that definitely comes into play.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are those tracks out there. I think everyone has that for sure. There's those tracks out there that you're like, how the fuck did this person do this? And
Yeah.
then it just discredits everything you've done, you know? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes I'll like think I'm like, hey, this sounds pretty cool. It gets released and like, it does fairly well. And then like one of my favorite producers, like Yotto, for example, like comes out with a new track
Uh-huh.
and I listen to it and I'm just like, oh my god, I suck.
You'd be surprised how many people on episodes so far say the exact same thing. And it's all people who are releasing amazing music, in my opinion, releasing on great labels, and it's almost across the board. And I think that's a characteristic of putting out good music, because being hypercritical of the stuff you're putting out allows you to allows a person to grow. If you think, "Oh,
Yeah.
I've the best fucking music of all time," it's gonna sit there. It's never gonna progress.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a good thing because like if you're constantly like pushing yourself to if you have that like fight in your mind of like, oh, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, then like the next thing you work on, you're gonna try and make better than everything else you've done.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Now, when you hear some of those songs that, as you mentioned, just you say, "Fuck my the stuff I'm putting out sucks," right? You hear that track that just speaks to you. You mentioned Yado,
Yeah.
a track like that. When you go and then start working on music, do you find that that's a good influence to start putting out better music, or is it? Or do you get too much in your own head where you're like, okay, I just heard this amazing song. I need to put out music at that level, and does that act as a roadblock?
Um, a little bit of both. Like sometimes I'll listen to something and I'll kind of be in like I might get like inspired by it in like a way like, oh, like I don't want to say like I want to make something similar because like I
Hmm.
don't really want to like make music that someone else is already doing because I don't really see the point of that. But mm, when you hear like new stuff come out that like, for example, seems really really good, then like
Hmm.
I think it's like a bit inspiring. But at the same time, sometimes it's like, my God, I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So that just maybe influences you to just sit down and just start grinding on music.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then what's your day to day like? I know we're you're working, I'm working. We're kind of figuring out a good time to set up this interview outside
Right.
work hours. So what's your day to day like then in terms of
Um,
producing?
Typically I like work 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, like standard day job kind of hours.
Yeah.
I usually get home from work, 5:30, whatever. Um, Sometimes I'll just get home and like want to work on stuff immediately
Mm.
if I'm not half asleep by the time I get home. Uh, or a lot of the times when I get most of my music done is like later on.
Hmm.
Like a lot of the time too, I'll get home, like sleep for an hour, then I'll go to the gym and I get back home when it's 9 o'clock, and then
Hmm.
I'll work on stuff basically till 2 in the morning, which I
Mm.
probably shouldn't do because I can never wake up on time. And
Yeah.
but I find myself definitely the most productive and focused like between 10 p.m. and 3, 4 in the morning.
Mm.
Like I definitely get the most done like there.
What do you think that is? So you found that, and I've heard that a lot on episodes. So it's interesting that a lot of times it's middle of the night. People
Yeah.
working on music will disappear, lights are off, no one's bugging them. Is it that there's that
Uh
solitude there, or
Definitely like when it's like 2 a.m. and I don't have to worry about replying to anyone's texts or anything, or like
yeah,
getting phone calls, and I can kind of just like throw my phone away and not really have to worry about anything except what I'm working on, then
mm-hmm,
I definitely get more focused then. And I don't know if this is a thing or not, but I swear, like when it's just dark outside, like when I produce music, like always my like lights are off except for like I have some like color changing LED things in my room, and it just kind of
yeah,
makes it like very dim, and like that's kind of how I like to produce. Like
mm. Yeah. It silences the world a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of people who listen to this understand the same thing. When it's dark, no one is around you. You're just zoned into sitting in front of your computer and working on tracks. And I think that really
yeah,
like pulls someone
exactly.
into working. Yeah, project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely think I think another thing of it too is, like a lot of the music I make, like melodic house, progressive house, deep house, tech, whatever you really want
Mm,
to call it. I don't know. You can call whatever I make, and like similar stuff, like 30 billion different genres, whatever. Like most of the time though, it's played in like in dark clubs.
mm,
So maybe that's a thing where it's like if you're making music for like a certain setting, if you're in that setting, it helps maybe. I
yeah.
don't know. I think that might be a thing.
That's interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that because then it just translates better.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Or I
Yeah.
don't know, I'm more focused when it's like I can't see anything but like the project I'm working on too.
Yeah. Right. I love that aspect where it's pitch black and then you just have your computer screen and you can see maybe your MIDI controller or whatnot, right? But
Yeah.
but aside from that, it's dark. You're not pulled away by other things around you. Um, yeah, that's interesting. I've really heard that across the board. No one, I mean, maybe one person has said they like to get up early and knock things out, and then
I
go to.
I have before. I did that for a while. I'd go to bed really early and then I'd wake up like 3 or 4 hours before I went to work and tried to work on
Uh,
stuff. But the only thing with that I found is it's like I kind of knew that I had to go to work in a few hours.
yeah,
So I'd always kind of like be like time anxious.
yeah.
Like I was always like worried I'd come up with a good idea and then I'd just have to stop and then leave, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. Like in the middle of the night, you can stay up as long. If you have something that's amazing, you can say, "Fuck it, I'm not going to sleep for long."
Yeah,
You keep working.
exactly. I've done that where I've worked on stuff until literally 6 in the morning, and then I sleep for an hour and then go to work. But
Damn.
hopefully my employer doesn't watch this.
Hopefully they'll listen to this podcast. I don't think so. I won't. I won't. That's funny. Yeah.
I think
I
they're aware as it is. when I come into
Yeah.
work and like look like I'm not awake yet with like 3 Red Bulls in my hand. And
Uh-huh.
it's obvious.
What do you do for work?
I do inventory control and like kind of accounting for a company out here.
Okay, that's
So
cool.
I stare at a screen all day and look at numbers and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a lot of people now. It's like people are at work staring at a computer, and then for producers, they get home and they stare at a computer more.
Yeah,
It,
that's pretty much. It sounds strange. It's like I'll be at work staring at a computer screen and I can't wait to get off work to go stare at a different computer screen.
right, right, right. And you feel, I mean, this is for myself personally. I feel, I'm like, oh, I just wish I didn't have to work. Can you imagine these people that are out here not working? But the thing I want to do, as you mentioned, is go home and sit on a computer.
Yeah. I mean,
But,
luckily at like my work, like I can kind of just like I always bring my headphones to work and like
uh-huh.
just listen to like whatever comes out that week and like
Yeah.
while I'm working and then I can kind of just ignore people at work.
Yeah, that's nice.
So partly it helps me be more productive at work and then like secondly like I can catch up on like what came out that week or like some stuff you might find some new songs and like some mix or DJ set or something that you like and then
Hmm.
find new music and then that's always kind of inspiring too. So
Yeah, yeah, totally.
sometimes I'll literally just be listening to some completely random stuff and then I'll just have like an idea pop up in my head and even what was the other day? It was about 2 weeks ago. I was at work and I was listening to some like folk song playlist thing. I just wasn't in the mood for anything dancey or electronic at all and
Mm.
didn't really want anything with like vocals, but I heard some like folk song and I just randomly some idea just popped up in my head. So I grabbed my phone and I ran to the bathroom and started like humming this idea I had in my head into like a video on my phone and
Oh yeah.
it looks absolutely ridiculous, but I came home that day and like wrote it all out like using my like keyboard and
Yep.
because I was like, oh, this sounds cool in my head. So I don't think it ended. I don't think I ended up actually doing anything with it to be honest, but sometimes that
Yeah.
happens.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely wanted to get into that as like what's the process for going about a track. So as you mentioned here, something pops in your head, it just catches you, you're running with it and seeing kind of where it goes. But aside from times like that, what's a typical process for sitting down and working on a new track from start to finish? What's that like?
Um, so I know some people will like say they like start like fooling around on a keyboard until something sounds right, and sometimes they do that, and then other people have to have like some kind of foundation, like drums and stuff laid down, and then they write a song around that. And I'm kind of both. Like the other day, I started something, and I literally just wanted like this like groovy drum loop, and I was just fooling around, like throwing in different samples and something, and I had like eventually kind of sounded cool, and then I just wrote the rest of the song, like the actual song parts of it, like around it.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that happens. Um, I get a lot of ideas when I'm not at home.
Mm.
Like I'll get like definitely when I'm driving. If I'm like outside somewhere near like a lot of nature, I'll get ideas or like sometimes strangely enough, like I'll be at work and I do too.
Yeah.
Like
Like zoning out.
never really like I don't think I've ever gotten a song idea when I was like in a club or something because I'm usually just like tired and just want to leave.
That's funny. Yeah, yeah. I think part of that is, say you're in nature, you're walking or whatever it is, or you're at work and say you're like zoning out a little bit and you
Yeah.
can kind of engage in like divergent thinking and just zone out. That's when those things can kind of click.
Yeah, I definitely think if I'm in like an environment that's not similar to music, I like for example, like if I'm in like someone else's studio and they're working on stuff, I probably won't get any ideas from that. Or
Hmm.
like if I'm at like a show or I'm DJing or blah 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 whatever, then also like nothing. But like if I'm doing something completely irrelevant to music, that's where I usually get ideas.
Yeah. Interesting. So then how does that play into so the couple tracks I wanted to talk about today are, the new 3 on Root
Right.
to Branch Volume 3. So say like Signal or Peggy. I know I want to talk about Peggy cuz I understand you wrote that and that's your grandmother's name. So I want to talk
Yeah.
about yeah.
Um. So the first two uh that were signed actually for that were Signal and Memories Never Die.
Mm,
And basically they started out as like little ideas that what was it? One of my buddies put me in touch with this guy from Belgium,
mm,
and I didn't know him at the time, and he's like, "Hey, this guy produces like music sort of like similar to you. You should check out some of his stuff." And then I think he like threw us in a Facebook group chat, sent me over some idea. I'm like, "Hey, these are really cool." He's like, "Yeah, what do you think I should do with them?" I'm like, "Well, I'm like, you got like a cool idea started." I'm like, how do you feel like if I like you like sent me over some of the parts and like I like added in some stuff and then like you added some stuff in later and
mm.
we went with that. So he initially sent me Memories Never Die. I think it was originally he called it like Close or something. I don't remember. I
Mm.
found like the original file on my computer the other day, and he sent me this back in like September 2017.
Okay.
And that's when he initially sent me it, and then I added some stuff to it because I think the way he had it first was it was more Eric Pridzy, a bit faster.
Mm.
And I was like, I think it'd be cool if we like slowed it down, like added like more ambient kind of sounds to it and stuff, blah blah blah. So I like kind of did that, added some stuff to it, blah blah blah. Sent it over. He really liked it, and he's like, "Oh, who do you think we should send it to?" I'm like, "Well, personally, I think this sounds like right up like Lane 8's alley." And he's like,
Mm.
"Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "He has that label. This never happened. That he just started." So, and I know like the idea behind the label, I believe, is like he wanted to like put out a lot of artists' music who haven't quite like they're not like big names or anything yet.
Yeah.
So I've met Laney a couple times in the past. I think I had his email address. And yeah, I ended up um yeah, once I like finished everything, I sent it over to him. He really liked it, and then he's like, "Well, we're doing this like upcoming compilation, so um I think it'd be cool if you guys like did like another track or two more." So
Mm.
uh one of us had like another rough idea, kind of sent it back and forth a bunch of times, and then Signal came, and then
Mm.
I think then yeah, so that's how those two started. Um Peggy was an interesting one. Don't I kind of wanted something similar to go along with the first two.
Mm.
So something that's not completely different because I had a few other tracks that like I thought about releasing with those two and they were just a bit too far off.
Mm.
Like they just sounded completely different. So I thought I'd start something new, and then the track ended up having this very like happy but sad melancholic feeling. Um so I thought it'd be a cool idea to like name after my grandma, and
Mm.
funny enough, the when I showed it to her the first time was pretty funny actually.
Oh, why? What? How do you mean?
Well, so I think I finished that in like the summer or like late spring, and blah blah. A few months go by, and I think I was out to lunch with her about 2 months ago, and I played it in the car when I was like driving back to my mom's house,
Mm.
and we're like listening to it, and she's like, "What is this?" She's like, "This is terrible." She's like,
Oh.
it sounds like the same thing over and over again."
Oh no.
And I was like, well, I'm like, oh, I like point at my radio. I'm like, oh, look what it's called. And she's like, is that my name? And I was like, yeah, I'm like, it's a song I wrote about you. And she's like,
Oh
oh, Rylan, I love it. Like, totally, she totally, like, I guess to a lot of people who aren't familiar with electronic music, you know, it's like
right,
especially houseier stuff, it's like a 4/4 kick drum for 7 minutes, and it's
right.
a lot of like electronic music's based on like repetition and then building on that like basic idea,
Yeah,
especially the stuff I do, right? It's you
right.
have like a small like melody and then you add drums and then something else comes in, something else comes in,
Yeah.
and then it just slowly progresses, and then that's progressive house to me. But yeah, she's like, what is this? This is terrible. It was pretty funny.
That's
And then
so
as soon as
funny. Oh my
as soon
god.
as I told her it was one
Yeah.
of my songs,
Uh-huh.
and then she's like, "Oh, I love it." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, it's named after you." And she's like,
Totally. Yeah.
"Oh, that's so sweet of you." It was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. And you know, like parents too, they're honest too. I honestly believe that like if I showed my mom something and she hated it and then I said, "Hey, this is from me." It's not that she'd just say she likes it. Like it would literally switch. Like she'd be like, "I love it," you know? Cuz
Yeah. Well,
that's just a family member,
well,
you know?
funny enough, like my mom and dad don't really mind the stuff I do.
Uh-huh.
Like my dad has quite like an interesting music taste. Like he always like sometimes I get home and he's just like listening to like stuff I would just never expect him to. Like
Mm.
the other day I walk in, he has like YouTube going and he's listening to some like DJ set off like Boiler Room's YouTube channel. And he's like, "Oh, do you like this?" He's like, "It's from Germany." I was like, I forgot who it was, but I was just like, "What? Where'd you find this?" He's like, "Oh, I know it popped up on the YouTube autoplay there." And
Yeah.
he's like, "I thought it was kind of cool." I'm like, "All right."
That's funny. Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents are so in the clouds that I'll mention things like, "Hey, I have this podcast," or I make music just as like for a hobby, and
Right.
they would never that would never happen. They never tune into anything like that. They're just doing their own fucking thing. That's
Yeah,
funny though.
it's kind of funny. And then my mom kind of funny enough, like before I was born and like when she was in her like early 20s, like
Hmm.
she was in a goofy punk rock band and she always used to tell me stories of like how she'd drive down like 6 hours to go see like the Who play or like
Oh
David
yeah,
Bowie and stuff. And so I think both my parents are like very open to like any kind of music, really.
yeah, yeah.
So like my mom even said she's like, "Oh, I have a few of your songs like added to my Spotify playlist I listen to at the gym or something,"
Uh huh.
which is kind of funny.
That's funny.
And like
That's
I've
cool. Yeah.
a couple of like times I've like DJ'd around here, she's even like come out and
Uh
she
huh.
has quite the time.
That's cool. Your parents are supportive, man. I mean, that's awesome. And I imagine being like I'm not a parent, but I imagine one
Yeah.
day. I mean, if my kid was making music, I'd be so fucking stoked on that. I'd be like, had to have every song. You know,
Yeah.
that's sweet. That's cool. They're supportive. But yeah, man, that's funny. So this has. I mean, just I keep kind of going back to it, but and actually to mention it. I think I saw today on your Snapchat story that Root to Branch crossed like top 10 on Beatport somewhere. Was
Yeah,
it
I think
Beatport?
it's the Beatport Progressive House chart. I think it got to number 5 or 6 today on the top
That's
100. So
that's
kind of cool.
so sick. Dude, that's super cool. But I kind of get the sense from you as we talk about these things that I think I don't know, you just kind of brushed it off right there. You're like, yeah, that's kind of cool. So are you more just kind of keeping your head down, work on the music, try not to get too tied into all of the periphery stuff or
Um, kind of like for like first and foremost for me, like the music I make, like for me to release it, I have to like it.
mm,
And a lot of the like electronic music I listen to is from guys like Lane 8, Yotto, Luttrell, uh, Atlas, John
mhm.
Hopkins, kind of similar sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so like it's not so much like a like bragging right or like look how well this is doing kind of thing for me. It's kind of like
Hmm.
the music I make, I kind of like want to keep it as like something I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Cause like I don't think I could ever like make stuff that like I'm not really into.
Mm.
Like it's kind of just like a side effect to me. It's like if something does really well, gets lots of streams, gets played by everyone, then it's kind of like cool. That's good.
Yeah.
But it's like first and foremost, like I just want to like make stuff that like I personally like. And by the
Hmm.
time I'm done something, usually I'm kind of like lukewarm about it.
Yeah, because you've listened to it 1,000 times,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Working through the
like
mix. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
usually I'll like something right away.
Uh-huh.
Like once I got like a basic idea down, I'll be all stoked about it, and then once it's like mixed and by the time it comes out and stuff, I'm just like I don't really want to hear it again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess like if something does really well, then it's cool and like ultimately like I'd love to do music like full time and like
Right.
just spend 12 hours a day working on music every day if I could.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I guess I should probably be a bit happier if something does really well because it ultimately would like lead me to be closer to that, but
No, but I think what you mentioned there is so important because someone starting out can get really into plays or like streams or whatever, or if they get that album or that track
yeah.
that's signed, and then it takes away from the process of making music. You need to love that process, and if you lose that because you get too excited about the other stuff, then you're gonna start
What
disenjoying the
well like
process.
in the past for me, even like about a year ago, like I remember like the first time like Above and Beyond played one of my tracks on their radio show, I was just like so stoked about it because like I never thought I'd ever see that happen. And
Mm,
like I found myself when I was making stuff after that for a bit, I would like really try and make something which I like thought would be popular as the last thing I did.
mm-hmm.
And so like I'd be working on stuff and I'd have all these ideas, but like none of them were that great. Like up until like I don't know, the last like year for me, I wasn't really a big fan of a lot of stuff I released.
Mm,
Um Mainly because I think I was focusing on trying to like one up the previous thing I did rather than
mm-hmm.
releasing stuff I like. And then I kind of got out of that luckily, and I found like that mindset isn't the best to be in when coming up with like new ideas.
Mm.
So then I kind
Yeah.
of but yeah, like a huge part of that was like me sending over like song ideas over to Lane 8 and he'd be like really into them and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then some of them like he wasn't so much, and then I found really just like this like the tracks that I really liked
Mm-hmm.
myself, or like I came up with an idea and like I liked it so much that I ended up working on it for like 10 hours the same day I came up with it, end
Yeah.
up being the best ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's kind of strange, but like the tracks that I've done in the shortest period of time have like I like the most and also they do the best. So
Yeah.
it's kind of weird. Like I had this one song, I don't really want to like name which one it is, but people can take their guesses. And I worked on this thing for like 5 months.
Uh-huh.
And I had this idea and it was kind of cool, and I kept changing stuff, changing stuff, changing stuff, changing stuff, like kept working on it. And then like 5 months later I kind of just decided I'm finally done.
Mm.
And I'm like I released it and it didn't do that good, and I didn't really like I was just kind of like whatever about it.
Mm.
And so I've kind of found myself in this like area where it's like if I have like an idea and I want to work on it like like for a long amount of time when I first start, or like if I finish the idea quickly, then that's the stuff which usually like I like the most because, well, probably because I don't get sick of it as quick. Because if
Uh
I've worked on it a shorter period of time, I'm not gonna get sick of it. And
huh.
also, I just think like if you have a good idea to begin with and you just go with that idea, then it's probably a good idea from the beginning
Right.
rather than like trying to force something.
Yeah. Yeah. I I love how you mentioned that because I think that's so insightful because if a person is just hammering on something for too long, reiterating point, okay, I'm gonna
Yeah,
redo this lead on top of it. No, okay, I'm gonna hit it, I'm gonna try it again. And over time, you're gonna listen to that thing so many times that it's just gonna it's you're you're gonna get too, I think in your a person will get too in their own head about that
yeah,
track. And
exactly. Like
yeah,
if you keep going back and changing things and then second guessing yourself, and then I find that if you're really forcing it, that it ends up not being that great.
yeah,
Well, if like you
yeah,
have like an idea and you like the idea right away and you just finish it and get it done with,
yeah.
then it's like okay, you had a good idea from the beginning and it ended up good.
Right.
Versus you had an idea which was like, oh, it sounds kind of cool. And you add stuff, add stuff, add stuff, change something, and then by the time it comes out, it's just kind of like you kind of just change so many things and like second guessed yourself so many times that like maybe it wasn't just a good idea at all if you really
Mhm.
had to change something that many times, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's yeah, it's that overworking process and it's cool just I mean the last like couple points you made I think are just so insightful because you can tell as I or I can tell rather as I listen to you speak about this that you're very engaged with how you're feeling when you're working on a track like what's working what's not just to be
Right.
so insightful to say like hey when I was trying to one up my last track you noticed that you weren't enjoying the process as much and those I think are can be pitfalls for people especially starting out that maybe you get a couple tracks that get a little traction and then you don't know
Yeah.
what to do. It's like you got to get back to that place that you just do you. Just make the
Yeah,
stuff you want to
exactly.
make.
You can't like you can't force yourself to really try and doing like you don't want to like start a song and being like I want this song to be top 5 on Beatport and get like 100,000 streams in a month.
Right.
Like if you're starting out a track like that, then like
Oh yeah.
you're kind of taking away the creativity of it and like
Yeah.
the whole musical process, and you've kind of turned it into like it's a task.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel like music can't be turned into a task, right? It's not a spreadsheet where you just
Right.
enter in numbers or something. It's something where you have to come up with an idea, right? So you can't like force yourself to finish something. And I've gotten a lot better at that lately. Is it's like if I have an idea and it's 2 or 3 weeks later and I go back to it and it's just kind of like you don't know what to do with it and
Hmm.
it's just not quite there, I just delete it. Like I don't even look at
Yeah.
it ever again. Versus like a year or two ago, I'd have an idea, it'd sound kind of cool, and then I'd come back to it a week later, add something, and then, I'd really try and force myself to finish that idea. So if I have anything like that now where it's like, I don't really like it a few days later, or, you're kind of just stuck on it, I just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Just
just,
kick it.
yeah, and I find that's like very important to me because
Yeah.
otherwise then I end up working on some idea which isn't very good for a couple of days when I could have just started on something new which could have been good from the get-go. So,
Oh, dude, that's oh man, it's so
yeah, you don't want to waste your time on something you have to like force cuz you can
yeah.
always just start a new track idea.
Right. 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 So just to speak to that point, I was just actually today or maybe the other day sending a buddy an idea for like a collaboration. Of course, like I'm doing this for fun, right? But
Yeah.
I send it to him and it's something that sat on the back burner for a couple months. I was like, maybe this could be a collaboration track. I don't know. See if he
Right.
likes it, right? And I beat that thing to hell and it's sitting there maybe 50% done. I don't really like it. I haven't reopened it. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And in same sense, I just started working on something where it clicked in like a day. I literally put it out and I have like 3 minutes done within like one day, and I love it, you know. And that's the thing is like that first one. If you push that through the finish line and release it, it could be garbage. You know, you're just trying to get it
Yeah,
done.
I feel like chances are, like, if you have like, oh, like, that's happened to me hundreds of times, or it's like you have an idea where you're not that into it, and you're kind of forcing it just to finish something. Then
Yeah,
it's probably just not going to be that great to begin with. So just start on something new.
yeah. I like that, man. And then it's like this whole creative flow process where you want it to click quickly, where okay, you have this idea, you want to run with it, things are moving quickly, but music production, especially electronic music production, is so interesting because it's that creative process, but it's also you do have to be technical in the
Yeah,
DAW, so
that's
it has to be both.
that's like one reason why I really like electronic music is like I can pretty much like have an idea and do
Mm,
like I can make the track sound exactly how I like. Like I'll have like a basic song idea. I can choose the drums I want. I can choose all the
hmm.
sounds I want. I can choose the arrangement, how it's mixed, everything, right? Like I've always liked that aspect of it, and like I can pretty like you don't have to, you have like if you're in a band or something, it's like if you have like a song idea and then you have like the guitar player wants to add in this part to it, the vocalist wants to do this to it, and then like the final product isn't really what you wanted to do.
Right, right.
Like I find that very limiting
Hmm.
versus like in like electronic music, for example, like I can create something exactly how I picture it to be
Yeah.
without like anyone else really. I mean, of course, there's always like labels suggesting changes or like stuff like that, but that's usually really minor stuff. Like it's 2 minutes too long or something.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, that's a good. I've thought about that too, and it's a great point because you have access to everything,
Yeah, you have
and
like complete creative control over everything from like the moment it started to like yeah. So
right, right, and then it makes a person, and it all is done in a DAW, but you have to understand percussion, right? I mean, there are elements to that I think would come more naturally to like a drummer, but if you start in electronic music, you have to learn how things fit. It kicks pretty easy, but when you're getting, different like fully fill in a song and making that fit right and sound
yeah,
correct, that's a whole different ear for percussion, so you have
yeah,
access to
it's
everything.
also kind of weird in electronic music because I mean it's not just like writing a song. It's like you're we're writing the song, all the melodies, chords, everything.
Hmm.
You're choosing all the sounds, so you're technically
Hmm.
like recording all the sounds for it. Then you're mixing it, so it's not just like there's always that perception where it's like, oh, people who make music on computers aren't that talented because they can't play an instrument. Well, I'm
Right,
like,
right.
the equivalent to that would be someone who goes out, gets a guitar, like makes the amp sound exactly how they like it,
Right,
record the part of the guitar, and then bring the guitar into the studio, make it sound good, recorded. Oh, and then you have to do that with five other instruments and vocals, right?
right, right,
So
right.
it's not like you're just dragging and dropping a few things together and you're done, right? It's
Yeah.
you kind
Well,
of have you have to
yeah.
have knowledge within everything from like songwriting to you know like more technical stuff like mixing, mastering, blah blah blah.
Yeah. I think before electronic music was as huge as it is today, when it first kind of came on the scene, maybe 2008, 2010 in North America,
Yeah,
people would talk a lot of shit, oh, they're not musicians, etc. And it's completely the opposite. As you mentioned, you have to be in control of everything, and that's a lot of responsibility. And we didn't even talk about the mix. I mean, the mix, you can write the song, and if you have a shitty mix, it's not going to sound
yeah,
good.
it's not gonna sound great. So
Right.
I mean, anyone who raises that question, you can send him off to someone like um I don't know, like Andrew Bayer. He
Mm,
has a degree in music from Berkeley, which is like the best music school in the
right.
world.
Right.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah. It's
you're not just like playing a guitar and creating the part. You're making the sound the guitar plays. You're writing the melody the guitar plays. You're recording the guitar. You're recording everything else, and you're doing that with like like 15, 20 different sounds. And
right.
then you have to
Right.
create a whole final product of everything put together. So,
Yeah. And there's so much music out there too that everyone is like raising the bar. I feel like monthly, daily. I mean, there's such amazing music out there, but then someone will come out and they just put out a track. And you're like, what is this? Like, what were they
yeah.
thinking when they did this thing? And so for that reason, everyone in this world it raises the bar too. So everyone's producing at this high level.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
think with like technology, like a lot of people said like, back in the early 2000s that like the internet's going to be the death of like music and
Yeah.
this and that cuz like record sales went way down and and people were like, "Oh, anyone can go get a laptop and make like electronic music now and stuff." But like instead of that, it's turned into you have the entire internet with billions and billions of people out there. And if you
Yep.
have something which clicks with people, they're going to share it with their friends,
Right.
this, and that. And you can suddenly be one person without any major record label touring a year later. Like,
Yeah.
that wasn't possible in the 90s,
No way.
right? Like, you'd have to have connections to like a major, like, record label, and then it would have to get played on like FM radio. You'd have
Right.
to get a record contract and all this.
Yeah.
And not to mention, like, if you did that in the 80s, like, you couldn't just go, like, tour by yourself. You'd have to go get a band, and,
Yeah.
there's a lot to it. So I think now, like, everything's more accessible more than ever, and I think
Hmm.
a major part of music not, like, going away due to, like, declining record sales is, like, streaming services.
Yeah.
Because someone can go pay $10 a month and they pretty much have I don't know the exact numbers, but like 80% of the music ever created is there on Spotify,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and to kind of to speak to that same point, I think it's amazing that along with access to music, and I've mentioned this on other episodes, but I think a great example of this is like Julian Gray, where he does so much in social media and like his YouTube channel, where
Yeah.
he's built out this like little world where people listen to his music, they support him on Patreon, and it's like its own little thing, and other people,
Yeah, yeah,
if they're
for
not,
sure. I'm
yeah,
like I'm
you know,
I'm pretty close with Julian. Like actually, I sent him over a song idea the other day and he's gonna work on that. So we might have
nice,
something together eventually next
yeah,
year, but
hell
um
yeah.
yeah, he definitely has he has his like own little fan base even.
Right. And you can do that now. I mean, all
Yeah.
those
And that's
Patreon's
that's
free,
using
Spotify's
yeah,
free.
that's
Yeah.
using like all just online resources like
Right.
YouTube. His YouTube channel's pretty popular. He has a Discord server where there's like 50 people online all the time.
Yep.
Um yeah, streaming stuff like Spotify, Apple Music. He has
Yep.
his like music tutorials, Facebook, and like people follow him everywhere there, and like they all talk about music production, like Julian's music and stuff like that. So
Right.
that didn't exist. Like if you were a smaller artist in like the early 2000s even like before social media was a big thing, then like how was someone who created electronic music at home like ever really going to get noticed unless they started to know people like who like owned clubs and like
Exactly.
it's I think it's easier now than ever.
Right. Right.
But at the same time though, because it's easier, there's a lot more people doing it, so it's more competition, but as far as I'm concerned, like music isn't really a competition anyways, and like
Mm.
if you make music that you like and like it's what you want to do, then it's not a competition. You're just putting out like art.
Right. Right. And I think it's just changed. Like as you mentioned, 80s, 90s, someone like Julian being kind of building out that small little ecosystem, you couldn't do that without
Yeah,
all
like
the pieces of
unless
technology.
like you
Yeah.
can't really think of an example like that unless you were like small band who played in like little bars in like a city, and eventually, you know, like people would spread the word that way. But it's a lot easier now to like go and find someone's song on YouTube, copy the link, and fire it over on Facebook Messenger.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
I think like I check my Spotify stats quite often. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
what was it, like 3,000 people apparently listened to my music like last Friday or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know 3,000 people. Like, I don't think I've met 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the heck? And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, without that, especially for like someone like me who like kind of hides at home a lot and just makes music, it's like before all this technology that wasn't possible.
Right. And then I got to imagine that making the music, of course, when you start making music, it's for yourself just because it's something you enjoy. But that
Yeah.
has to be such a fulfilling feeling that people are enjoying your music. You know, you look at that and you're like, man, 3,000 people like my music. They want to listen to it on their time. I mean, that must be so cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I always think too, it's like if I make music that I like, chances are someone else will also like it. Because, like,
Hmm.
there's a bunch of artists I like, and, you know, they all have, like, their own fan bases and, like, play sold out shows all over the world. So, like, if I like something and, like, let's say, like, I really like Yotto,
Hmm.
and, like, you know, he was here, like, 2 months ago, and his, like, show was sold out, and, like, I think almost all his tour dates in the US were sold out. So, I mean, like,
Yeah.
if I like music like that, and I have similar tastes to other people, then if I make music I like, then chances are other people are also going to like what I'm making because I like it. If
That's
that
a
makes
good point.
sense. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
if I make something I'm not totally into, chances are people probably aren't going to like it either.
Mm.
So I always like consider that something, and I also don't think music should be a product in the sense of, you know, I'm not releasing a new iPhone, or um you know, it's not really a product. It's like something I made, and it's like I feel like there has to be some kind of like genuineness to it.
Yeah. Right. When it becomes commoditized, it becomes
It
trash.
kind of takes it
You
kind
know?
of takes
It,
away from it, and
yeah.
you can kind of see that with
You can
like
feel it.
artists who have kind of stayed to themselves over the years, and that's why like one reason I've always looked up to Above and Beyond is
Yeah.
like they kind of started out small, and they actually started their record label because no one else would sign their stuff.
Yeah.
I read that once online somewhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, they kept kind of towards that. They've always stuck to the same thing. I mean, their sounds changed a little bit, but overall it's been relatively, I don't want to say underground because I know someone will make a big deal out of that, but like it is underground compared to, you know, pop radio.
Right.
And for example, when I saw them at ABGT 250, they pretty much had their own 2-day festival with 25,000 people in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere in Washington State. And
Yeah.
all the artists on the lineup are just like artists on their label,
Hmm.
right? It's not like they're flying in pop stars. So, like, they have that, like, dedicated fan base, and there's people from, like, 40 countries there, right?
Yeah.
So, they've had that dedicated fan base over the years, and because they've stuck true to themselves and not just made whatever's popular at the time, you know, their fan base has grown and grown and grown and grown to the point that they can do something like that. And I think that's,
Yeah.
like, I think that's super cool, and I think that's important when you're, like, doing anything creative to, like, stay true to yourself and not just like I don't know what's popular right now. Like I think a lot of like tech house stuff's right now like popular right now.
Totally.
Like I
Yeah.
don't think
Yeah.
you should just go like, oh, this is popular right now, I'm gonna go make that. Like
Right.
dubstep's tomorrow next like popular next year. But like, oh, I'm gonna make
Yeah.
dubstep next year. And like you can kind of see artists who do that, and I don't want to knock anyone, but like it's easy to tell who's
Yeah.
kind of just trying to like ride the wave of whatever's popular and they have a fan base where they might release a song or two and it might do really well because it's flavor of the week.
Right.
But you're not gonna see them go and pull off a like 25,000 person festival with pretty much themselves and like their label in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere from 40 countries.
Totally.
Like,
Totally.
I feel like if you make genuine music, you'll have like a very genuine fan base. And those are the people who literally stream your music, buy tickets to your shows, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I've always considered that important. So
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And especially now you'll see things come up on maybe Spotify where it'll be an artist that's also say sponsored by a whiskey or something, and it's just so cringe. They're listen
yeah,
to my new song and then it's supportive, and it's a timing thing. It's like if you want to get to the top in a year, okay, I mean, you can
yeah,
go and sell out, but as you mentioned, it's going to be flavor of the week. It's going to be here. It's going to be
yeah.
gone. It's
There's a lot of that going on in like 2012, 2013 when like in my opinion, that like those 2 years is when like dance music really took off in North America, and
yeah,
like there was like like when like Martin Garrix released like Animals, for example, and like
right,
all that, and like I'm not dissing him at all. Like he kind of came up with that idea, and that song just became so big that like a month later, there's like 30 other producers making tracks which just sound like that,
exactly.
right? And they're like,
Yeah,
oh, this is
that's yeah,
popular. We should make something like this. And some of them did become popular themselves. But then
right,
a year later, when that kind of sound goes out of style because it's a flavor of the week thing, they're nowhere to be seen.
right. Yeah, and I don't discredit anyone who gets popular
Yeah,
quickly
no,
like
not at
Martin
all.
Garrix, because if you have such a brilliant like take or mind on a genre that you make something so different and life
That, yeah,
shattering,
like, for example, with him,
like
he came
Skrillex.
out, yeah, like Skrillex came out with the whole American kind of dubstep thing. Because, I mean, like, dubstep before was like a very UK thing as far as I
Right,
understand, and it didn't quite sound like what Skrillex did.
right,
And then Skrillex came out with Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, and at the time nothing sounded like that. Like
exactly.
all the credit in the world to him, because like I mean I was really into that, and I'll go back to it and it's still really good. But
Oh,
I
it's
mean like
amazing. Yeah,
of course there's he comes out with something like that, and then you it was just such a new fresh idea
yeah.
that like a whole bunch of other people try to mimic that after.
Right. It's the difference between that unique idea that someone has that's totally revolutionary and then everything that
Yeah,
fills in after that that tries to
yeah,
ride the
exactly.
coattails,
Like,
Yeah.
and like I'd never diss anyone for like even if you are trying to like get your music popular, I'd never diss anyone for that either. It's like
Right.
everyone can do their own thing. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
speaking from like a personal level. Like, I personally would never want to make whatever's popular at the moment. Like, I want to make stuff that like I like, not what's just popular right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, if anyone
And
else wants to do that, feel free.
well, and you mentioned this earlier, but just to re-emphasize the point, then
Yeah.
when you're working on stuff that you enjoy, then it's a fulfilling process
Yeah,
of making music.
I think like if you enjoy something, you're really gonna want to. It turns out better anyway.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
I could probably go right now and make like some, I don't know, like tech house song that sounds like 13 others that are
Yeah.
popular right now, and I don't know, maybe it would do good, maybe it wouldn't, but I mean, I just have no desire to do that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's this crazy balance,
Yeah, and
because it's creative, but it's also there's this world of people coming up. It's yeah, it's a balance.
yeah, there's a lot to it. But I mean,
Yeah,
all the artists I've ever like looked up to, and like I could even throw Skrillex on that list, because like I
yeah,
remember the first few times I saw Skrillex, it was like mind blowing. You've never seen anything like that before.
yeah.
Funny enough, he's in Vancouver tomorrow, so I'll
Are
be
you gonna go?
I'll be there.
Yeah. Well, my cousin was a huge fan of him, and I guess when he transitioned out of playing in From First to Last and that kind of fizzled up or whatever, he was $60,000 in debt. He put everything into electronic music, was
Yeah.
living on couches, and he just commit and
Yeah,
then
he
what come
made like scary monsters and nice sprites on like headphones and laptop speakers.
oh,
And
it's
then
insane.
speaking of Dead Mouse again, he sent it over to him and Joel recognized like, hey, this is something new, put it out on
Yeah.
his label, and that kind of like kickstarted Skrillex to being like probably, I'd say he's probably one of the top 3 biggest electronic music artists of like all time,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Totally. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean the same thing again, Canada and Dead Mouse with Rez. She has out 2 albums. She blew up so quickly, but it's because it's a unique sound. It's this
Exactly.
whole new approach, you
I'm
know?
like I know Rez pretty well, and like I met her about 2.5, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And she's actually like a source of inspiration for me as well. Like I went out for dinner with her that day, and I knew she was on like Dead Mouse's label. I wasn't super familiar with her music at the time, but this is when she was first, like very first getting popular. Like she was playing smaller stages at festivals and stuff, and I ended up like talking with her about music, and we were listening to like old Dead Mouse in the car. And what was it? Yeah, I was just chatting with her, and she basically like told me, she's like, yeah, I saw. Funny enough, I saw Dead Mouse like a few years ago, and then like kind of decided like that's what I want to do. And
Holy shit.
she told me like she like sat in her room and like worked her ass off like every day until
Yeah.
she like made stuff that she was comfortable with releasing, and then finally some of it got released, and she kind of like and she still does that now. Like her music now isn't too far off from like her music 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Like she like even though she's probably one of the biggest like electronic music like artists right now, like she's stuck very true to like what she does. Like you don't see her going and producing whatever's popular like this month,
Right.
right?
Right.
She has her own sound and she sticks to that. And again, a great example of this is she has like a super crazy big fan base, and these
Yeah.
people will like, they go to different cities to go see her, like multiple
Yep.
cities in like the states and stuff, and some people go to like 3 or 4 different shows in different cities because
Yeah.
she has that like super genuine fan base who
That's
really
it. Yep.
appreciate her for like sticking to that.
Right. Right. People can sniff that out if you're genuine or if you're phony, in social
Yeah,
media instantly. And then it's when you have that genuine sound and that genuine purpose behind the music, it's gonna i- it's gonna bring a different person, a different type of fan base, as you mentioned, to follow that artist. And it's gonna be much they're gonna follow that artist much more closely, I think.
yeah, and yeah, with her like a few months ago, she played Vancouver in early November, so
Hmm.
about a month or two ago, and she sold out a whole arena. Like it was her tour, and she sold out a whole arena. And like 2.5, 3 years prior, she's playing at like the smallest stage at the festival, like middle of the day, and there's like 100 people watching her.
Right.
And
Right.
she like she like does sound like she has her like own sound, and she stuck to that. Eventually people started getting into that, and I mean you even hear music now that sounds inspired by like her stuff.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Once that, yeah,
she
yeah,
kind of like had this like vision of what she wanted her music to be, and stuck to that, and people started to dig it. It was something new and exciting, and yeah, because of that, she now has like probably one of the strongest fan bases in dance music, I'd say.
yeah. And that is so inspiring for people starting out and coming up because, as you mentioned, a year or two earlier, she's playing the smallest stage, and then she's playing arenas. And I mean,
Yeah.
you almost forget that people start. Yeah, when you look at people that make amazing music that you look up to, who are say touring or whatever, you forget that they started somewhere. You know,
Yeah,
they
like
started.
I even mentioned that. I'm like, can you believe it? Like I like mentioned it to her. It was like, I've known you for like 3 years now, and like, do you remember like the first time you were here? Like, she's like, I'm like, this is kind of crazy, and she's like, trust me, I can't believe it. Like, it all happened so quick. You don't even like realize what's happening. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm like, it's crazy.
yeah, yeah. And oh man, that's so cool. That's so cool.
So like
And
yeah, from like me just talking to her on how she like kind of had like a similar start to electronic music that I did. Like she went and saw Dead Mouse and started like doing stuff after like she saw him,
yeah,
and like I that's who like I saw for the first time, and like and basically she just told me like she just worked really hard and like stuck to what she wanted to do, and like you don't give in to like what's popular at the moment, and sure enough she's now headlining festivals,
yeah.
right? So
Fuck, man, that's so cool. And um, just speaking with producers starting out and people who have, you've maybe been chatting on Instagram around this show, and they say, "Hey, I'm starting out," blah blah blah, and we get to talking. I would imagine that piece, that story you share in this conversation, is got to be so inspiring because I mean, you guys are just buddies, and she started out just like everyone else,
yeah,
just put in the time, just dug in, worked really
because
hard.
I mean like 3 years ago it's like I never thought like I could have music
Yeah,
played by like bigger radio shows or like the stuff I want to do. It seems so far fetched to me, and then
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, just mentioning some of the things today, what I do for every podcast, I'll take notes. I'll go and listen to everything that a given guest has put out just to make sure I'm familiar with everything. And just seeing that right away, Elliptical Sun, and then up until today, having performed on the Above and Beyond group therapy guest mixes and releasing on Lane 8 table, like it's nuts, man. It's so nutty, and it's it's really bizarre for myself too, because I get to sit down and ask you questions about this. I just talked with Deza a week ago. It's so bizarre, man, and I get to hear you guys' story, and
yeah. I know. I
it's
know.
so inspiring.
Me and Deza like talk quite often.
He's a good
I
guy.
know him fairly well. So
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
you mentioned that he said you mentioned me, I wasn't too surprised. We like
I noticed. Yeah,
oh
you
yeah
didn't flinch. You're like, yeah,
we
yeah.
well me and him have like a remix together coming out in January.
Okay.
Um, I think someone asked Derek to do a remix. He kind of like sent over the original. He's like, "How do you feel about doing like a remix of this?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm cool with that." And I started an idea, sent over to him, blah 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 blah. So we ended up
Yeah.
doing like a remix together, and that's out in about a month from now.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, yeah. I think he may have mentioned that. I mean, he has, of course, as
He
yourself as
releases
well.
so much music.
Oh
It's
yeah, it's
insane. Like he
insane.
that was
I
always a
think he has.
problem for me is I'd release something, it would do fairly well, and then I wouldn't have anything afterwards. Like
Uh huh.
I'd release one thing, it would do good, and then nothing would happen for like 5 months.
Right.
So the last 6 months, especially for me, I've been really focused on just like starting new ideas, finishing them, and having lots of material lined up. So like for 2019, like I think I have stuff planned out now up until March, April. So
Yeah. You got tracks in the vault.
yeah, like I have a lot of stuff finished. I played a couple of them in my guest mix if anyone listened to that.
Ooh.
So there's a
Yeah.
few unreleased ones in there, and I kind of that's what I wanted to do with that guest mix kind of is like the EP which was coming out, and then some of the stuff that I have coming out later in the year.
Uh huh.
So kind of like a
Yeah.
glimpse into what's coming ahead. That was kind of my idea with that.
Hmm. What's on the horizon in terms of touring? I mean, I had the same conversation with Deza. Coming down to the States is nearly impossible
Yeah,
visa wise, but I
it.
always push for it.
I might be in luck, and I haven't
Uh-huh.
formally done this, but although I'm like born in Vancouver, lived here all my life, blah 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 blah. My mom's an American citizen,
Okay.
and like because my grandpa was in like the U.S. Navy or whatever. So I believe, I'm not really sure. I've never really looked into it, but technically, if you're born to a U.S. citizen, you're automatically given U.S. citizenship.
Okay.
So I'm fairly sure I have dual citizenship. And if I do,
That's
then
funny.
I
You're
don't.
figuring it out now.
If I
Yeah.
if I do, and I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
because I've tried to look it up before, but like if I do, then I don't have to get a visa to play in the
Right.
States, and that's probably the U.S. is easily the biggest market anywhere, right? Just because
Yep.
there's like 20 major
LA.
cities.
Yeah.
Yeah, LA,
Yep.
Seattle, Portland, Washington, New York, Chicago.
Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah,
Just
there's
I keep pushing for
there's like, I don't know, 20, 30 major
Right.
cities,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So
No, totally.
if
Yeah,
you
and
if you don't have to get a visa, then it's a lot easier to just go down there, and then you don't have to go through that.
yeah.
Because if I did, like, if I don't have U.S. citizen, it's kind of weird to say that, but if I don't, then yeah, then you have to get a visa, and it's like, if I only had like 2 or 3 shows lined up, it's not really worth going through the trouble of applying for a visa, which is valid for a year, and you only go down there 2 or 3 times, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
I've never really gotten super serious about touring. I'd like to like kind of establish my music a bit more and like do that kind of first. It's not really a
hmm
big rush for me. Like if that
yeah.
happens, it'd be cool, but it's not.
It's
It's not like a priority.
it's secondary.
Yeah.
More I kind of the sense I get from you is the influence or the emphasis is sitting, working on the tracks, putting out the stuff you love, and everything else is kind of periphery right
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It's sweet, man. I mean, I just I don't think I'd mention this in this episode, but one thing I do want to make sure I've mentioned is I've been just this whole week just humming Signal. It's just so damn catchy, man, and I love that song. And I think all
Thanks.
the recent releases, yeah, absolutely, and I think all the recent releases are just are awesome. And I went back and listened to some stuff from a few years back that I wasn't familiar with because I just had started listening to your music, and it's all really fucking good, man. So I you know, I'm excited to see how this progresses because it's so cool. I mean, releasing on Lane 8's record label. I just I see the future being really fucking cool in terms of releases.
Yeah, hopefully. That's like my main goal for 2019 is like kind of continue like the end of the year for me worked out really well. Like the last like
Mm.
month or so. That's
Yeah,
worked
yeah.
out well, but I mean prior to that I didn't really release anything for like 4 or 5 months. But
Mm.
like 2019, my main goal is just like consistently have something come out like pretty much every month.
Yeah, yeah.
And
A song of yeah.
like Derek, like Deza did that. And I think he said he released 24 songs
He did
in
something insane.
2018.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he was releasing so much stuff, and then eventually like just it would be hard to like listen to like a radio show or something and not hear one of his songs on there
Right. Right.
because his stuff just became so like in tune with like what everyone was playing.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'll have like success with like one song, but then I won't release anything for 4 or 5 months, so then everyone, including myself, kind of forgets I exist. So
That's funny.
my goal for next year is not have gaps of inactivity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have like I probably have like 15 songs that no one's ever heard of before that are like done.
Uh-huh.
And some of them I finished like 2 or 3 months ago, some of them finished one on the weekend. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean I listen back to them and I actually don't mind them. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing is that they're done and I can go listen to them and I don't hate them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good like test.
Yeah, the fact that you don't hate them probably means they're just fire, just absolutely amazing. Because that's a
We'll
barometer.
we'll we'll see what
That's a
happens.
good. Well, that's a good marker, you know. Because I've heard that time and time again where. You know, as I mentioned earlier, producers will be like, "Yeah, this is all right," and the fact that if someone gets that stage, you're like, "Yeah, okay, I kind of like it," then it's probably just so damn good. But yeah, man. So well, yeah, hell yeah. I'm excited to see what comes in the future, and reason I ask, future touring, all these kind of things is one day. I mean, this isn't going to be for a while because my girlfriend and I are moving into a bigger place where I'll actually have a studio. But one day I want to be able to like sit down in person, do these episodes, have these conversations face
Right.
to face, and
Kind
you
of
know,
like Joe Rogan.
oh,
That's the first
that'd be
person who came to
ideal.
mind.
Yeah, stream it. Yeah, dude, exactly, and have people play in Arizona. I mean, that'd be fucking cool. So, who knows what the future holds? But dude, this has been super cool, man. And um, it makes sense because you're making such amazing music, but just so insightful about the process and being in tune with yourself and really getting a good grasp of like, hey, seeing when you're kind of going off the path that you're trying to stick to, I think is cool, man. And for all those people listening out there, I feel like it's super inspiring and good for those people starting out producing and wherever they are, year in, whatever it is. But for real, man, super cool.
Thank you. Appreciate like
Yeah,
thanks for
dude.
having me.
Of course, man. Of course. So, yeah, thanks again.
All right. Well, take care.
All right, and that is it. Thank you to Rylan for coming on, sharing, his experiences, having these conversations, or having this conversation rather, around how he addresses music and all of the really cool and really interesting things we got into. Um, I can't say enough how appreciative I am of him, of other guests, of you guys out there listening, and also not to mention, thank you to MLT FTR for sharing out that song at the beginning of the episode. Really, this has just been so cool. We're at the start of 2019, and I really am looking forward to seeing where this thing goes for the rest of the year. Really excited about it. So next week, look for a release with a doctor known as Dr. Michael Grandner. He has dedicated a career to understanding sleep and studying and researching sleep. I could go on about his accolades because they're insane. I mean, you look at the amount of research he's done. He's a practicing doctor at the University of Arizona Medical School, and it's incredible that he was willing to sit down and have this conversation. So that's coming next week. Look for that. We talk about the health benefits of sleep and the repercussions of lack of sleep, because all of us out there making music tend not to sleep so much. So look for that. Again, thank you all, and I hope to speak with you all again soon. All again soon. All again soon. All again soon. All again.